Namaste, Yogi Astrologers, and welcome to Karma Yoga Center's Alchemical Astrology Report. This is for the new moon in Aquarius, which will be on Monday, February 4th at about 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and our report will take you all the way through to February 20th when the next full moon cycle happens with Katrina. I'll get to the energy of Aquarius and the full moon here in a moment, but I really want to start off by talking about February 2nd. And many of you may know that date as Ground Hogs Day. Ground Hogs Day is actually the exact midpoint between the seasonal shifts from the winter solstice, which was on December 21st, and the spring equinox, which is on March 21st, or actually it's March 20th this year. And so February 2nd is the exact midpoint between the seasons. Now, this is celebrated in many different wisdom traditions around the world, and particularly in wisdom traditions that are honoring and connecting to the spirituality of Mother Earth. The one that we particularly know and connect with for our astrology is called Imbolc. That's the Gaelic Celtic word for this half turn between the seasons. And many other traditions honor this as well. Some of them aren't quite sharing the deeper wisdom of it, but the Catholic Church also has Candlemas, which happens February 2nd. And many other traditions honor this. And if we look at Imbolc, this Gaelic Celtic tradition, they also celebrate the goddess Brigid. And the goddess Brigid is the goddess of the sun, which may seem a little unusual if you've studied Greek or Roman mythology. The Greeks and the Romans attribute Apollo as the god of the sun. However, you can look at many traditions and the gender of the sun is either masculine or feminine or both or neither, and so it's not always strictly associated, but I'm going to refer to the feminine energy of the sun in this report. We just took a trip to Japan back in November, and the Japanese tradition honors the sun goddess with Amaterasu. She's the one that shines her brightness out into the air, and so does the goddess Brigid. What does that really mean, and why do they use the sun goddess to be honored at this half point between winter and spring? Well, we've come out of the dark season of winter when we've had the shortest time of daylight on the solstice and the longest night of the year. And those following days after the solstice and the days leading up to it is considered the dark season, the time where we go inward, when the trees drop their leaves, when the trees and the plants go dormant in their photosynthetic activity, and it doesn't look like any life is necessarily happening. We're not seeing any flowering or budding of the trees or producing of leaves. You get the idea. Just take a look around Mother Nature where you're at. However, by the time we get to February 2nd, which is 6 weeks into winter, there is some magic happening around, and magic that we're not necessarily seeing with our eyes. And my former world of study was in biology, and I love looking towards the natural world to help understand astrology. And as astrologers, Katrina and I greatly recommend that to you, to study astrology, to just look at what's going on in the natural world. You don't have to be all academic about it and memorize archetypes and get into cycles and understand these rhythms of the planets, but you can just simply look outside, and whatever nature is doing at that time tells you exactly what the archetype of the season is. Meaning, if the sun is in the sign of Capricorn, and you want to understand Capricorn energy, go outside and look at Mother Nature and what's she doing at that time. And to simplify it a little bit more for this Imbolc and understanding astrology through natural cycles, really, if you want to get reconnected to the natural cycles, look towards the sun, the moon, and the earth. Those other planets out there are sharing beautiful energy, like Mercury talks about communication and Venus is love. But the sun, the moon, and the earth can help bring you back into the natural cycles of the universe, of the earth, of the sun and the moon. The sun tells us the cycles of day and night. The sun and earth interplay tell us the cycles of the seasons. We have 4 seasons and 4 half seasons. So if you put that into a circle or a wheel, it looks like basically a wagon wheel with 8 or a pie with 8 slices in it. You have the major cross of the major seasons, and then the cross in motion tilted at a 45-degree angle, and that is the cycle of the half seasons. The moon, we have the new moon to full moon, which we follow in this report, and then the moon has all its phases in between, where it's crescent, where it's a half moon, where it's in the balsamic and dark moon phase. And if you just simply start tuning in with your awareness to this, the teachings will come. You don't need an intermediary between you and the earth and the sun and the moon. You don't need somebody else to validate for you what you're feeling in these cycles is true. You just simply turn to them and open up your intuition, open up your love of nature. I think that's really the first way to start with this. You're saying, how do I start a spiritual path? How do I understand astrology? How do I know about all these cycles and seasons? You open up your love for Mother Earth, and that love for Mother Earth will take you outside for a hike. It'll take you out to watch the full moon. It'll take you by the ocean to watch the rhythms of the tides, and these things will just naturally happen. But getting back to it, right now we're in the half cycle between spring and winter. And I was talking about the energy of the Sun Goddess Brigid, and she helps to show us the energy of the eternal fire that's always there. This time of year, at least in the Celtic tradition, it's a time to do ceremony and ritual with the fire. The sun's light is coming back. The days are getting longer. The nights are getting shorter. This is a time to look at what's the vision for to come, even if we can't see all the steps of how we're getting there, like what's going to happen in the summer, in the fall, in the coming winter season. Particularly, you can look to cycles of agriculture. What are you going to plant? Where are you going to put it? How are you going to till the field? But all that doesn't come yet. Right now, we're still in that partially dark energy. And I love, as I was saying before, looking to biology. In biology, this is a time of year where the plants, the biologists describe it as heliotrophism. Helio is the Greek word for sun, and trophism is love. And so this is the time of year where your tulip bulbs, your daffodils, your paper whites, your hyacinths, all those little peoples in the ground, they're starting to prepare for the spring. If you happen to plant some bulbs and you plant them upside down, meaning the root was towards the sky and the sprout side was towards the earth, they will naturally wiggle themselves around starting this time of year and realign themselves so that the roots face down and that the sprout will now come up through the earth. It's amazing. It's amazing that this love of the sun, love of nature, will naturally turn these plants in right way. And that's what I'm saying for us as well as human beings. Our love for nature, our love for the sun, our love for Mother Earth, our love for our food, our love for water, our love for being outdoors, I think will begin to naturally turn us into the wisdom and a spiritual path. It is that simple to start with, of course. Looking at my notes down here for a second. This energy of Brigid, if we look to the yogic traditions, I believe also connects to Saraswati. Saraswati wants us to come into the flow of things, wants us to understand the rhythm. Saraswati is the goddess that represents our intuitive energy. And in all the wisdom traditions that we know, whether it's Native American, whether it's South American, whether it's the yogic traditions or the Celtic traditions, they all guide us to turn into our intuition. And our intuition is fed by the moon. Many traditions say the moon is the representation of our intuition. And Mother Earth, in the Mayan tradition, Ishel, the goddess of the rainbow and fertility and abundance, is the goddess of your intuition and just love of the earth, love of the animals, love of the water. You get the idea. So you can celebrate this on February 2nd on Saturday, this time of the midpoint between the seasons, with a little ceremony, with a little intention setting. Now, on Monday, 2 days after this Imbolc, it's called Lunar In Bulk. It's that same energy, but it's most directly focused on the moon. And this is when the moon is directly aligned with the sun. Sometimes the traditions will call the sun and the moon the eyes of God. From our perspective here on Earth, they're the exact same size, even though when we go out into space, they're quite different. But the sun and the moon, when we look at them from our human eyes, they are exactly the same size, more or less. And the moon represents, or can represent, that feminine energy, and the sun can represent the masculine, but it can be flipped, as I said. Brigid and Amaterasu represent the sun goddesses. And in some traditions, you know, you've heard the man and the moon. So don't get so caught up on the gender, but you can get the idea that these bodies, just like us, both, whether you're a man or a woman, you have a masculine and feminine energy inside of you, and you can express both. So the sun and the moon are now, or will be on Monday, in the signs of Aquarius. So let me talk about what the energy of Aquarius is. I'm going to pick up my notes for a moment. And Aquarius energy has a lot to do with visioning, with interrelationship. I'll explain what that means. If you're familiar with the sign of Libra, Libra has to do a lot with personal relationships, your relationship between your partner, your children, your parents, somebody you work with. And then when you take it out to Aquarius, it's how you relate to larger groups, how you relate to society, how you relate to your tribe or your culture, how you relate to greater circles of beings, peoples, energies, places. And so Aquarius wants you to have more awareness than Libra. It wants you to be more aware than just one other person. It wants you to be aware of many others, in particular society. And I use that word society because Aquarius wants us to have awareness of society so that we can have a higher purpose with that. And I'm talking about Aquarius in its most beneficial and highest representations. Aquarius, when it's not expressing itself well, is the elite. It's the 1%, it's the billionaires, it's the people in government who don't care about the welfare of the individual or the singular person. And they're either looking out for their own benefits, for resources and greed, or they're looking out for it as just a whole collective, and it doesn't matter about the welfare of one individual. And why would Aquarius want us to align with higher principles in society? Well, ultimately, I feel Aquarius is a very spiritual sign to align society with nature, with natural law, with things that are in the frequency, high vibration of nature. And an example of this is, how do we live in cities and places where we do have economic systems, and how do we no longer pollute the earth or start to not pollute it? How do we use finance and money that's not for greed, but is for the purpose of raising people's vibrations, for giving people good health care, for giving people clean drinking water and safe food to eat, and having people all feel safe in their homes and not overwork and overwrought because they have to accomplish and achieve something by societal standards? Why can't we use all the resources and goodness of the earth to support our society so that we can all fulfill our life purpose here, which is to help each other find love, to help each other feel secure, to help each other fulfill our purpose, which is to connect to God, to Goddess, and to fulfill that for each one of us. Currently, I don't feel our societies, by and large, are doing that. I feel like they're following principles of greed and not following principles of need and spiritual connection. So when the sun and moon are aligned in Aquarius, it's saying both the masculine and the feminine, both the inner and the outer, both the seen and the unseen, are asking us to find how we can do this alignment. And to add to that, the planet Mercury is also conjoined, meaning with the sun and the moon, together in the sign of Aquarius. And Mercury is the energy of communication. So we're being asked to not only look inner and outward on this Aquarius, we're asked to communicate about it, to speak about it, to share about it, to come into community with each other and say what our visions are for this new society that aligns with nature, not trying to force nature to follow society. It's a reverse of the paradigm that's been before, and some are calling that, as well as myself, the old patriarchy. But as I've said in previous reports, the patriarchy isn't bad in and of itself. It's the misuse of patriarchal powers to oppress, suppress, repress, and depress. The patriarchy, though, in a high alignment, it can help that Aquarian vision to say, how do we accomplish this? What do we do? What's the long-term goal? The patriarchy has endurance, or that masculine energy has the ability to refine things and keep it in line to say, this is our goal. We want to accomplish this. It may take 100 years, but it's worth it to do this, and we're going to follow that. That's positive use of the patriarchal energy. So we have the sun, the moon, and the Mercury there, a great opportunity to start discussing this and opening this portal. To add to this, we're still in the energy of the eclipses that happened in January. Eclipse seasons go for 6 months. The next eclipse will be July 2nd, and it'll be a total solar eclipse, though we won't see it here in North America. But for the 6 months of January up until July, we're sharing that energy of what happened during those few weeks in January. We did have that eclipse. So keep an eye on what happened back in January, and that's going to set the tone all the way through July. Also, and I'm not going to talk too much about this because I'm not a Chinese astrologer, but the second new moon after solstice is always when the Chinese New Year starts, and this Chinese New Year is the Earth Pig. The Earth Pig has a lot to do with the sign of Taurus in Western astrology. It's abundance, it's fertility, it's fortune, it's gathering together the five senses and using them in a positive way. It's creating beauty. Katrina has been talking a lot lately about a poem, and I can't remember who the author of the poem is, but it's "Truth is beauty and beauth truty," or something to that extent. In the notes below, I'll put what the actual author is and the exact quote of this is. But the Earth Pig and the energy of Taurus has to do with, if you're an absolute truth, beauty will come forth from that. Nature, which is all around us, is always truth. Nature doesn't lie. Nature doesn't hide. Nature doesn't have an ego. And all the elements of nature don't have that ego, lying, deception energy. And so whatever nature puts forth is beautiful and truthful. And that is, I believe, what this Earth Pig energy will be sharing this year. Go look up on some Chinese astrologer websites to follow more, but that energy kicks off on Monday, February 4th with the new moon in Aquarius. The last two bits, or really one bit that I want to talk about, is on February 18th. This is a big astrological day. It's when the dwarf planet Chiron goes back into the sign of Aries for 7 to 8 years. Chiron takes 52 years to orbit around the sun, and in that time it varies in the amount of time it'll spend at a sign. It spends the least amount of time in the sign of Libra, which is 2 years, and it spends the most amount of time in Aries, which is 7 to 8 years. So this is a time to pay attention. Chiron is where our greatest wound is, both as an individual and as a society, or as a culture, or as a collective. And coming out of the sign of Pisces, where it was for about 6 to 7 years, we were looking at our wound with spirit, with God, with the infinite. Are we loved? Can we trust? Do we have faith? Is it possible to reconnect to that part of ourself that is beyond time and space, that part of our spirituality? Or more to it, do you even have a spiritual path? And we've investigated that for the past 6, 7 years. And now when Chiron is going into the sign of Aries, we're investigating our wounded masculine energy. Where are we misusing and abusing our masculine power? Do we feel like we belong on this planet Earth? And this is for men and women both, and for children, and for elders, and for transgender people. We all have that masculine energy within us. The masculine energy is how we stand up for ourselves, how we empower ourselves, how we use what we want to put out into the world, how we use our personality and the gift of our ego in a positive way. And so this can be an awesome time to heal that masculine energy. I called 2019 in my previous report the year of the rising masculine, or the rise of the sacred masculine. When we started the year, the planet Mars went right into the sign of Aries on January 1st. And now Chiron is joining, well, Mars will have left by the time that Chiron comes there. Mars is now going into the sign of Taurus on February 12th. We'll leave that out of this report though. But on February 18th, Chiron is going into Aries, and so there's going to be a lot of energy coming up. How do we heal the masculine? How do we use the masculine to heal the Mother Nature and the environment? How do we come together and use our power for I stand for this, yes, and use that for positive use? Now to add on that day, and I have to look at my notes because there's a lot of it, the sun also goes into the sign of Pisces on February 18th. And Venus is conjunct with Saturn. These are huge energies. The sun going into Pisces is looking at spirituality and how our heart energy connects to spirit and nature. Venus conjoins Saturn. Saturn is the rule and lawmaker, that sacred masculine power that says, are you in right way? Are you following your dharma? Are you stepping into your purpose? And Venus is saying, how do you love? How do you use your abundance? How do you use your resources? And how do you use your five senses? This is a big kickoff energy here. So look at February 18th and the energies leading up to it and after it as a big time to look at how do we heal? What's our wound? Are we in alignment with spirit? And is our heart connected to our deepest spiritual path? Woo! I think I'm done. And I hope you all have a beautiful time out in nature. And if all of this doesn't make any sense, just go outside and enjoy a good sunset. Namaste.